This is Marketing Uncomplicated. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the show. I have a force to be reckoned with, Bre Fernandez, an award-winning associate creative director, and we'll get into what she has accomplished to become an award-winning associate creative director, as well as a professor of advertising at the University of Miami, currently off season, and Miami Ad School. I also want to mention that she is picking up on her comedy, and she is a local comedian, and we'll dive into that and all the amazing things that she's doing. So welcome to the show, Bre. We're really excited to have you.
Thank you so much, Sasha. It means a lot. I just laugh hearing you describe me as a person because it's so multi-hyphenated, but I call it on the spectrum.
Yes.
Tell me you're on the spectrum without telling me you're on the
Exactly.
spectrum.
Exactly.
Especially as a woman, I feel like we can never be like that one thing. We have to be like super multi-hyphenated to prove that we matter. So maybe that's what it is, but
I love it.
Really like to dabble in a lot of
Yeah, no, but you
fun.
have such great energy, and I think, it's a nice transition, not transition, it's a nice kind of like through line and a fluid line, considering that you are in the creative space. It kind of is like a natural, or maybe for some, it's a natural flow into the comedic space. So I'd love to like hear about that transition. But first, first things first, let's dive into all the amazing work that you're doing, and let's start in the beginning in terms of how you kind of jump started into this, because there's some interesting topics that we want to touch on and that are timely with today,
Right.
in terms of like the DEI cuts and everything, because you work not just in branding, but you work in a specific area of branding, which is cultural, and the buildup of that. So, let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's definitely timely to say the least, and that's an understatement, but it's interesting how I even got here because this world isn't a world that is privy to people from where I come from. So I'm Cuban, right? The concept of
Yes.
advertising and branding is so far removed because it's not something our culture promotes. It's not like doctor, lawyer, engineer,
Yep.
So for me to find this, I had to venture outside of my circle, my inner circle. I actually went to law school, dropped out. I'm like, what do I do with my life? I'm good. Can I curse? Can I do
Yes,
it?
totally,
Like, I'm good
totally.
at bullshitting. I'm good at bullshitting.
Yeah.
And I'm good at writing. Well, being a lawyer isn't in the card, so I left law school. So what else
Yeah.
is in the card? And when I ventured outside of my circle, who was lawyer, doctor, accounting, engineer, which there's nothing wrong with that. I just always found myself in a different space and I didn't
Yep.
know that existed
Yep.
until I, befriended some people who were in the marketing or advertising
Yeah.
space, specifically creative advertising. And I
I
found,
want to interrupt you for like 2 seconds.
yeah,
The trajectory of lawyer, engineer, or whatever, was this a planned trajectory family? Because I mean, obviously being Cuban, there's a
yeah,
lot of like, Cuban, Middle Eastern, it's like they have a set
yeah.
number of like skills that they want their kids to go into. So that obviously was your parents, I'm assuming, and not you.
Yeah, so ironically, my best friend is Syrian and she is a doctor.
Yeah.
So check there,
Yeah.
Yeah, my
Me and
mom,
you were the black doves that kind
yeah,
of like walked the other direction.
it's funny because there's so many things I want to answer, but it's funny because my mom still to this day doesn't know what I do.
Yeah.
Like I've explained to her, she doesn't know what I do. My mom's a doctor in her country, my dad's an engineer.
Yeah.
In America, she is still in the medical field, and my dad is now a developer and he works with the school board and he like does all that stuff.
Amazing.
So for them, it's still kind of like, what is it that you do? And I've had to explain it to them over. They think I work like Univision as a broadcaster because the concept is just so removed.
It's out there, yeah.
From
Totally.
from their culture, but yeah. So kind of continuing on how I found this opportunity was with Miami Ad School, which is an amazing force to be reckoned with. It is a Harvard of creativity in advertising, specifically creative advertising. It's how you get your foot into the door at all the major players. A lot of the CCOs at like I think Tor is still at Apple, if I'm not mistaken, but he went to Miami Ad School. Spotify CCO, a bunch of CCOs at from Meta to like Shui, everywhere. Like they've at one point probably went to Miami Ad School or know somebody from there. So that's how you get in. You got to go to a portfolio school.
Yep.
So I got into the program and that's what opened the doors to me, thankfully, right? Because again, like advertising, specifically creative advertising, it's very much who you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's not DE&I based. It's very much legacy.
Yes. Yes.
It's very much your close network.
The whole ad world is that way.
The whole can we call it brovertising?
Yes. I love that. Has it changed since Mad Men? That
It
show?
has.
No.
It has.
Yeah.
I feel like we're kind of paving the way forward for it to look like a different landscape. But
Yeah.
a lot of work has been done, still needs to be done. It's
Yeah.
definitely more multicultural now than when I first started, or were my female bosses or whatever bosses like first started as well. So,
Yeah.
but yeah. So entered at FCB. That was my. Oh, sorry. I entered at Narrative. Actually, it's no
Yeah.
longer around. It was an experiential advertising agency by Russell Simmons.
Okay.
Yeah, so we did a lot of branded events with like HBO Ballers and the Tribune, I think, with Derek Jeter. I don't know if that's still around.
Mm-hmm.
And like other like local key players in the New York area. It was run by Trisha Stone Clark. That she was a badass like female CEO. Just kind of seeing her
Yeah.
in charge, I was like, wow, get it. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
that was awesome. And then from there, my trajectory went into more like the traditional, big umbrella groups, right? We have Omnicom, we have IPG, we have Saatchi, we have or not Saatchi, we have Publicis. The three, I
Mm-hmm.
think they're merging.
Yep. Yep. They are. You're right.
Yeah,
There
but
is a big
before they
merge
were
happening.
separate, before the
Yes.
acronym was this big, it wasn't
Yeah.
this big.
Yep.
So, yeah, started FCB with working on the FDA account. I worked on the Nivea account, then switched over to
Nice.
Saatchi and channeled my inner 45-year-old man who drives a truck,
Yeah.
whatever that is, like to write for
Yeah.
that as a creative.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, bounced around. I've worked across all coasts. So I've worked in New York, I've worked in California, I've worked in Texas. That was interesting. Now
Amazing.
I work in Miami. And just as a refresher, I know I speak very fast. My thoughts are going 100 miles an hour, but just to kind of clarify what I do. So as an
Yes.
associate creative director, I am responsible for technically, like overseeing the entire campaign from start to finish, right? Like me and my partner, we work in conjunction, typically until you get to the CD level, which you can work in isolation, which I have CD'd at some points, but I'm in charge for all the messaging. So I always use this as an example to my students, right? When I'm
Mm-hmm.
introducing them to like campaign concepting and stuff, like when we think of Nike, right? We think of this like timeless brand. We think of Just Do It. Who do you think came up
Mm-hmm.
with Just Do It? This
Yeah.
tagline. I did. Well, I
Yeah.
didn't do
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Nike
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
But my partner and I, we come up with this concept to, finalize this tagline, to finalize the visual look and feel, how we're going to sound in culture, the experiences we're going to put out in culture,
Mm-hmm.
the commercials. How do we sound like in commercials? What are we saying? What are we promoting in radio and billboards? When you're at festivals and you see all these branded experiences from LaCroix or from Chase Sapphire, like
Yeah.
we're putting these conceptual events and just campaigns overall together through all these like
Yeah.
multi-channel touch points depending on what the brief is.
So it's
So,
really like how somebody experiences the brand.
right. How
Yeah.
someone experiences the brand for sure. And, I think especially today, it's very
Yeah.
crucial you have the right people speaking for like working on the brand that can speak to the brand.
Yeah. Working on
As
the
we've
brand that can
seen
speak to
that
the brand.
sometimes
Yes.
when your internal teams aren't reflected in terms of like how
Mm-hmm.
the larger culture is, it's easy
Are
to
they
get
the
canceled.
audience? Correct, right?
Are
Is
they
what
the
you're trying to get
audience?
at.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
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 Exactly. Yeah.
No, sometimes, you can't always be the audience. You have to do a lot of research, but as a creative, you
Yes.
have to familiarize yourself. You have to research and like on the nuances of culture, on how
Mm-hmm.
people like, for example, even generationally, because if you're a traditional brand and you just want to jump on something that's being said, like the word chuggy or lit,
Yeah.
can you say that? Can we talk like
Yeah.
that as a brand? No, it's
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It's kind of performative. So this is just something as a writer, as an associate creative director, that you got to kind of filter, right? Like
Yes.
nuances,
Yes.
verbally, like when we're
Oh,
kind of
because a lot of brands have effed it up. They've fucked it up beyond, right? So,
yes, we've
because they
seen
haven't had the right people on board.
yeah, and it's crazy. We kind of saw that with the Kendall Jenner Pepsi campaign.
Okay.
That's always like the big case study that we use in classrooms. I don't know if you're familiar with the
No,
Pepsi.
let's talk through it.
Yeah, so it was essentially in a period of like racial unrest, right? I think it was
Mm-hmm.
during the George Floyd situation,
Yep.
and Pepsi came out with this ad where to solve like the undertones were, and I don't want to screw it up, but to solve or to ameliorate racial unrest or this civil unrest, we're going to put Kendall Jenner
Yeah.
in this protest and have her offer police
Yeah.
who are spraying down the crowd, who are
Yeah.
protesting with Pepsi as a symbol of like an olive branch.
Oh no, the wrong person.
Yeah, the wrong person, wrong messaging. The
Yeah.
crazy thing is I do have friends that worked on, yes, that got a lot of backlash. Right? It was
Yeah.
very tone deaf, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
And it's crazy because you can kind of maybe tell, like, were there filters in that room at one
Yeah.
point that spoke up and we're like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Like, what, like, you know what I mean?
Why are
So,
we entering in this space, and why are
and
we choosing her to be like the face of this in this point in time?
and just to add to that, sometimes you have diverse voices in the room, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're included.
Yeah.
Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Or
We'll get into that.
yeah. So that happens sometimes, and I know this like through a, you know, friends of friends that did work on it and they did voice concerns, but ultimately, like, it's the decision makers who, because it does go through layers,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how
Mm-hmm.
you kind of ask yourself, like, how was this put out? Like, at what point in the system or the process, what didn't someone like raise
The
their
flag.
hand, right? So,
Mm-hmm. And the red flag is what I'm referring to.
and the red flag.
Yeah, yeah, that's wild. I do want to segue now into like the cultural aspect of things because of the very fact that decision makers within the room are important, because even myself, I've experienced that working at an enterprise company. We developed an app that was for a segment of the, you know, the younger millennial generation and wanting them to move away from tangible media,
Right.
and moving into, like, you know, taking in their media through an app, through digitally. And the person in our audience was sitting in the room and worked in my team, and she had just graduated from college and she had an amazing idea. And when you work for some of these enterprise companies, it's very stuffy, and it's the concept of, well, you know, she can't really voice her opinion in front of XYZ who's C-suite
Right.
level. And I was like, well, why is she in the room, first of all? And if we're hiring people and we want their input for the actual audience that we want to target, then I think we might as well listen to them, right?
Right.
So it's kind of like, you know, I got a slap on my wrist and I'm like, this is crazy. We have to change our ways, you know? So let's dive into that from developing brands really from a cultural standpoint to really have the need, and how do you feel that this is going to change, and if it is going to change, especially now with the direction of, you know, how things are going today.
Yeah, I think I'm interested to see how it will change, because there's two factors at play, at least from how I see it. There's
Yeah.
DEI, that is about, and there's this man who kind of was like a pioneer in multicultural advertising. His name is Louis
Yeah.
Massenot. He founded Alma, and he had a
Yeah.
really cool quote that I wanted to say, because I think it's important when we talk about DEI and multicultural
Yes.
advertising.
Yes, because
So
I also want you to take a step back and actually explain how DEI started, because I think a lot of folks have a misconception to what DEI actually is and why it was born, right?
right, yeah,
Yeah. So go
yeah.
ahead.
Yeah, no. So Louis Massenot, big pioneer in multicultural advertising. He said something where it was like, DI is about values in your organization, and
Mm-hmm.
multicultural advertising is putting it in play, like actually capitalizing on those values, like putting it out in the out in the world, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
servicing
Mm-hmm.
the Black and brown community, servicing the minority communities, right? But you have to do so. It needs to be reflective of the culture within, and putting those advertising dollars into these marketing budgets, because it's kind of weird, right? Like, the America is a very diverse nation, and it's going to continue growing even more diverse, right?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
say terms like general market, but the new mainstream is multicultural. The new mainstream is
Yes.
diverse. Everyone's multicultural. So it's kind of like a misnomer, and strange that we're not putting the right amount of ad dollars into multicultural advertising. We kind of almost get treated like an afterthought. And sometimes it's, and I don't want to speak on behalf of what's happening. My thinking is it's because of the decision makers in the room. When you don't
Mm-hmm.
have the diverse decision makers in the room, they're not seeing the value, how it could drive business in, you know, pouring a little bit more ad dollars in 20% of the population, for instance, that is Latino. Like,
Yep. Yep.
why are we creating campaigns with general market audiences in mind, and then translating it to fit the Latino mold? that
Yes.
the
Yes.
math isn't mathing there, but
It just
to your
doesn't help to do a translation to support
yeah,
another like subsect of the US, right? Who take
it's
up, by the way, a majority of this country.
right, and it's
Yeah.
bizarre because there's so many like there's so my brain is like I want to because there's so much to answer and what you're like
Referencing.
referencing, right? So I'll just start from this point. So from this point, from what I've seen, because I didn't used to work in multicultural advertising at all. Like I used to work more in the general market advertising categories, right?
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
you're just kind of throwing some target demos like, the foodie shopper mom, like you kind of
Yes.
explain this woman or whatever, or this, tribal subsect, but it's never like we're going straight, we're targeting Latinos, we're doing this. And so now that
Yes.
I'm in this um arena, in this sector, I was like, oh my God, because
Yeah.
wait, hold on, I'm so sorry, my computer
That's
is
okay.
on
I
life
can cut this
support.
part out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, back to that. Yeah, so now that I'm on this side of the fence where I can leverage my Spanish speaking abilities and I am working with partners, I'm kind of like at a loss because if we are, for example, if we're speaking, and I don't want to throw direct names of the clients that I'm working with, but if we are speaking to minority Latina women who are moms, would it not make sense to have your
Mm-hmm.
multicultural or team representative of this audience and work alongside the partner agency in conjunction versus having the general market agency have the idea and then the partner multicultural arm like retrofit it somehow or kind of work backwards to make sure it's hitting the mark and translating it, which often it doesn't because as we
Mm-hmm.
know, Latinos are not a monolith. Like Mexican, Cuban, Puerto Ricans, we all speak differently. I'm sure even within the Black community, right? Like there's differences there. Asian communities, there's differences there. Like we're not all a monolith.
Absolutely. Yep.
And these briefs that we're given and the way that we're just kind of like these boxes that we're trying to check off on when we're trying to ideate for these campaigns, it becomes very cumbersome, to say the least.
Yeah.
And when you mentioned about being that intern in the room and not having her voice being taken into consideration, like I could feel that firsthand because I've always been that squeaky wheel. From when I started, I
Mm-hmm.
remember
Mm-hmm.
being in a room with
Yeah.
all white men and they tried to
Mm-hmm.
promote this commercial that to them and their references it made sense, but to like the younger demographic which was we were servicing was me didn't make sense. And I remember raising my hand and getting like you're saying like, oh, we know better, but
Yes. Yes.
which takes me now to when we saw the rise of DEI,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I started in 2017 in the industry, and DEI and the conversations around DEI, there was bigger conversations, a bigger push in organizations towards the George Floyd uprising, the movements with Black Lives Matter. That's when
Mm-hmm.
organizations realized there is disparities in our hiring, right? And personally, I had not thought about this. Like you see it as a woman of color, you see it when you're in these organizations, like, there's only like 3 Latinas or 2 Black
Oh,
people or
yeah.
whatever, but you're not in those hiring rooms, so you don't know how it operates. And I remember one time they asked me, like one of the recruiters asked me like, oh, how can we get more diverse candidates? And I'm like, well, where are you searching
Coming
for them?
from.
And it's
Or
like
or
your
or here's
network.
my question. It's like when they're saying how can we get more diverse candidates? Are you bringing candidates in just because of that, or are you bringing them in because you're searching for great talent, right?
Right.
So,
And
yeah.
and that's what I hate. It's like merit-based hiring and like diverse
Yes.
hiring are not mutually exclusive. You know what
No.
I'm saying? They're not
No.
mutually exclusive. Like we're not hiring just because you're Black, brown, or Latino. It's like we're opening the door for more people to have these opportunities that
Yes.
weren't taken into consideration before, right? Because
Yes.
that's where the inertia happens when you have like again like hiring managers at play that only hire within their network. Because when you get handed a brief 100 miles an hour and they tell you, we need to stock up on this, like we need creative talent right now, like you're going to go to your network, which is probably a reflection of you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or someone you know, you're going to hire a referral based on whatever. And again, the pool of candidates don't kind of look like the rest of the world, you know, or
Yes.
don't look like
Yes.
like America. And
Yeah.
so, and I remember having a conversation with a recruiting manager once, and I was like, oh, I didn't know this was where the disparity lay, because I wasn't in those rooms to say so.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
and during the DEI, movement in at least in advertising, in the rooms that I was in, like when I was working at Omnicom, for instance, you started to see more people that were reflective of the community come to be creative directors or chief creative officers, but not because they were DEI hires. Like, no, these
Mm-hmm.
people had an extensive award-winning resume that, like, with accolades and cons and Clios and whatever, that put them in those decision-making seats and made the work better and drove
Yeah.
business forward. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. Totally.
so it's kind of sad to see how it's been politicized, how
Yes.
diversity has
Yes.
been politicized, and how, now it's like, oh, you're in that position because you're Black or you're Latino
Yes.
or
Yes.
whatever. And it's like,
Yes.
well,
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think it's almost like, the more you talk, there's an interesting conversation that I had, the creative director for Timberland is actually an Italian guy. Like, I mean,
right.
like a thick Italian accent, right? I mean, and when you think about Timberland and where Timberland has been like for, the last X amount of years, you have to kind of separate where you're absolutely right. It's not just about who the audience is, but it's the amount of research that you do, and it's the creativity that is going to allow that person to really kind of uncover and discover in ways in which they're experiencing that product, or they're going to want to connect with that product, or they're going to want to enjoy that product or service for that matter, right? But it's connecting the creativity to the research done in the culture that really, like, and correct me if I'm wrong, that really creates that, like, that boom that really resonates with the end audience, right?
100%.
So, and it's not just because it's like, oh, for Timberland we need to go hire a guy who's like a jackhammer, living in the woods like somewhere, or like rides an 18 wheeler. There are those people that do that, but then Timberland has come up with like pink shoes and so on and so forth, and they're kind of enabling the cool hip hop girl in the Bronx in New York, but they could be living in Berlin, for example,
Right.
right? So it's really like that's a very like diverse kind of extreme balance of like a multitude of different. And when we say cultural, it's like cultural experiences of maybe not just like where you're from, but like what is the culture that you are interested from, like a person, right? The type of
Yeah.
music you listen to, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. And I think that you just hit the nail on the head there with, like, it has to be authentic.
Yes.
It has to be authentic because
Yeah.
when we do have people, like, that's not to say like you have to be a Latina woman to work on a Latina commercial, to really
Yes.
no, you just have to have like a deep appreciation for that culture to actually do the work and like surround yourself with people and like probe, because that's when stereotypes get baked into the commercials or get baked into the messaging and the storytelling, right? Like, we start seeing the Hispanic commercials just being about people eating tacos,
Yeah.
or the Middle
Yes.
Eastern commercials of just people eating hummus,
Yes.
or like,
It's so true.
Asians in IT or whatever. And it's like
Yeah.
these filters. It's like, how can we dispel these tropes? How can we dispel these cliches to
Yes.
show
Yes.
women, Hispanic women, in a different light that's not the spicy Latina? Can we show
Yes.
them being the business owner in the commercial? Can we show actual reflection of culture that doesn't perpetuate the same stigmas that we're trying to combat?
Yes. Yes.
And
So,
no, go
no,
ahead.
I was gonna say, so like there's almost like this educational aspect, like especially as you're like saying as it relates to food. Like I'm somebody who loves food across the board, right? But it's like I'm also intrigued as to like where it's come from. Like I know from you and I having like past conversations, you're also very into like teas and tea ceremony and
Right.
so on and so forth. But you don't look the
No.
people may say you don't look the part that's coming from like where the tea ceremonies originated from. But that doesn't mean that you can't educate yourself, enjoy it,
Right.
and they can't open up a different kind of culture of folks to come into that to experience and enjoying it. So why does it have to be cliche, is what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah. I,
Mm-hmm.
I think 100% the clichéness, the tropes. I think that's something that I personally have taught my students in University of Miami and Miami Ad School, and we look at campaigns and we dissect them, and we're like, okay, like there's this campaign by Heineken, lighter is better. It was to promote their light beer.
Yeah.
Like, yes, lighter is better, but what made it worse was that they had a Black actor in the ad.
Yeah.
That the beer was pushed away from and handed to a white woman. I'm like, again, like who was in
What?
this? Yes.
Yeah.
It was a whole thing. I don't know if it was done in America. It might have been done in overseas.
Europe?
I have to fact check myself and my receipts. But
that's wild.
But it's things like this. It's like who's in this room, like, you know, kind of filtering this out.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so, and it's crazy because, can I say something? So this is crazy. So I showed this commercial in the classroom, and my classroom was, you know, primarily Caucasian, with the exception maybe of like one Black student. And I'm like, guys, what's the problem with this ad?
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, I don't see it. And it wasn't a shock to me, because to me it was like, oh, this is interesting. Let's have this conversation. Like, and then when the Black student's like, why, you don't see it says lighter is better? Like, what? Yeah. And then they're like, oh man, I didn't even see that. And it's like, that's good. Like, we should have these conversations. It's not about like, you're right, you're wrong, but like, in having a diverse, like, opinion of creatives and accounts and strategists, like, we should all be contributing to the end product. Yeah. To the messaging, to how it's coming out in the world, because even it's all pieces of the puzzle. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm gonna overlook things. You're gonna you're a strategist. You're maybe gonna overlook some stuff. I'm gonna overlook some stuff. But I think it's like, if you have enough of the filters, diverse filters at play, I think that's beneficial for the end result.
Yeah, totally. I mean, thank you for that, because I think what I'm pulling out of this, and what is very important for me, and what I tell, small business owners and entrepreneurs, like, you have built your product and your service for a subsect of, X target audience, right? And what a lot of people tend to think is that they have one main audience. Yes, you can have one main audience, but there's a secondary and there's a tertiary audience as well, right? And we cannot miss out on those. But if you're going out and putting a product and a service into market, and you're not focusing on what they need and what they don't need, and like, even when you go out to get product market fit, and you kind of uncover, okay, well, we need to tweak it here, we need to tweak it there. If you're not constantly listening to the audience that you're pushing this product for, then why have you developed that product? And that doesn't just tie into knowing and understanding who your customer is, but it's how then you put out the content, the creative, the look and feel, and so on and so forth. And that's where, like, the synergy of, me kind of looking at it from a strategic angle and getting it out there, the creative has to support that, and it has to align with it, because the creative and the language that speaks to it, once you put it on a market, can either blow it up, or it can catapult it into, like, a ton of people visiting your website and purchasing. And that's where people miss the nail, is really kind of uncovering, like, how are we going to speak to this audience? And to your point, as you've been saying, what is the research? Where are they? What do they like? What's going on with them? How are they interacting with not only just my product, but maybe they are utilizing my product with something else. For example, I mean, we could talk about, paddle is huge right now. And I just had somebody on who's created, a new paddle clothing line, right? But could there be a synergy of somebody's coming out and saying, like, I have this amazing, like, energetic drink that can kind of be utilized, and we can create a culture of it being utilized in the paddle industry, right? So it's thinking of how you can connect your product and services to other kind of, products and services and experiences out there, that you need to be thinking of the layers, and not just like a one segment, like, lane, right?
Yeah. I like what you said about, like, the primary, tertiary, secondary, and tertiary audiences, because I do think sometimes you start moving away from who your real audience is.
Yes.
To hit those secondary, tertiary audiences so hard.
Yes.
That you lose sight of, like, your base. And I think the Bud Light commercial campaign, or it wasn't a campaign per se, it was a partnership. Bud Light did a partnership with Dylan Mulvaney, a transgendered influencer.
Yes.
And it wasn't like they did this whole rollout or a campaign, but Bud Light's primary audience is not that. They're not pro LGBTQ, per what I read, right? I could be mistaken.
Yes.
And there was major backlash. Major backlash, because they were at that point trying to align themselves with a little bit more, pro LGBTQ stances.
Yes.
And that campaign just backfired. exponentially. They did not have the back of Dylan Mulvaney or whatever. But and it stems from, you can go and service these secondary and tertiary audiences, but doing so in a way that feels genuine, authentic. Like I felt in that campaign specifically, for instance, it's like you have this entire like trajectory of like doing commercials of like back in the day of like women, beers, boobs, whatever. Like they've shifted. It's more funny and comedic now. But like to go full blown and join this bandwagon, that you're not a part of.
Yeah.
It's not only is it blowing up because your audience doesn't resonate with it, but people who are pro LGBTQ aren't going to resonate with it either, because you're not sticking up for the
you're not being authentic
influencer that you've been partnered with. So at that point, it's like nothing makes sense.
No, and you're just like coming out of the woodworks because you think that's the direction that you need to be going in, which is completely wrong.
Right. So if you're gonna merge, like you're saying, like the Padel guy and the energy, like if that's a merger that makes sense, like 100%. But if it's just this is trending right now, like we need ASMR is trending, but we're a rock company, like let's just do it because it makes sense. It's like, no, like, does it align with your brand? Does it align with your values to start, maybe moving in that direction? I think Jaguar faced some backlash for that same, situation with their rebrand. Like they're a very legacy car company. Trying to evolve their brand, trying to be more inclusive, and now everyone's making fun of them. I personally like the rebranding. I think it was cool, but it obviously to me doesn't scream Jaguar. But again, we'll see how that drives sales and all that stuff going forward. But
yeah, you're right. I mean, you reminded me of the Jaguar rebrand because I think like their old school logo just looked more luxe and rich, where this one is looking more like sort of modern and maybe like moving into like the Kia and like some of the other like new kind of cars that are coming out and like being cooler. And maybe that's their concept, is that they want to hit the younger generation, which I think they were anyway. But I think, it's kind of interesting to understand like why brands go through this like rebranding and concept changing and all that. So really my question is like, we've talked a lot about brands that have kind of, fallen flat like on their head for like things that they've done. What do you teach in your kind of classes, as well as, when you're working on various projects that come in through the room? Like, who do you guys reference? Who do you borrow concepts from that have really kind of, and this could be recent, this could be things that, have happened X amount of years ago, right? But I mean, it's like, who really kind of has consistently, or maybe not consistently, but who has kind of nailed it recently in terms of like, focusing on their audience, like doing the research. And you can really kind of tell, like just knowing the background of what you have, that they've done it,
Yeah. I think we can all agree that when we all saw these campaigns as females, we were like, oh my God, you can show that? Dove Real Beauty. I don't know if you remember the Dove Real Beauty. Like where, they really did a lot of research into like women not seeing themselves beautiful and how they perceive themselves, and then showcasing, like starting with that, like Dove Real Beauty Sketches campaign. That was like, I think the first marker of the campaign, where they had women describe how they think about themselves, and then the end result was like a picture of them, and they were actually more beautiful than they assumed to be. But then even from that, they continued like the campaign going forward, showcasing like all types of women across the spectrum of what beautiful is. Like beautiful isn't like, this skinny model looking figure. Beautiful is, you can be plus size, you can be you maybe can be paraplegic, you might have some sort of skin condition, you're still beautiful. And I think they've done like a really good job. They actually had a recent campaign about teenagers and filters. I don't know if you saw it was very, very I'll send it
eye-opening.
It was it was a campaign about like the distortion that teenage girls have with putting filters in their body and not thinking that they're beautiful enough, or something like that. But I think they've done a really good job from when they first started that campaign till now, and it's always hit and it's always resonated. And I do think maybe at some points there was a little bit like backlash in one of their executions, if I'm not mistaken, but it's hard because I feel like even some of my favorite brands at one point have not hit the mark, just because culture moves at the speed of now, and you want to jump on whatever
True.
trend is happening, and you think it aligns, and then it's like, no, it doesn't.
Yeah.
But Dove is good. I think Nike does an amazing job. They just constantly hit it out of the park with you know, with their messaging, like kind of the new campaign, like they had with Serena, they had with
yeah,
they
really choose like the power kind of like, know where it ties back to the brand of like just do it, because
right.
that tagline could be used anywhere. It could be used if you're an athlete, it could be used if you're an entrepreneur, it could be used if you're a mother, it could be used if you're about to buy a home. It can almost be used across so many like
Yeah.
aspects of life that I think no matter what direction they go, it will still resonate with who their audience is, because they're hitting a wide spectrum of people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because that "just do it" tagline came from a movie where the guy
Yeah.
was like trying to shoot somebody, and he's like, "Just do it."
Yeah.
But that's interesting, and it's
So
transformed.
interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah. I could be wrong, but I think that's what it was.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
when I did my research for my class, it was during the concepting phase, and
yeah.
that's interesting how we pull those conversational tidbits to kind of create these campaigns, because
Yep.
it's become kind of like a symbol of fitness and a symbol of like, get out there and go for it, right?
Yeah, yeah. I love that. So when you kind of think about like what are like maybe there's like three golden rules or four or five different like strategies as you're like building, but if we were to think about an entrepreneur who's listening to this, or a small business owner, because this matters, this
Right,
resonates from anyone down to like a micro business. What are the things that they need to be thinking about holistically as they're developing their brand and conceptualizing how people are going to experience this? What are kind of like the set rules that you and your team, or you teach, that you need to be really focused on, so that you can in essence hit the nail on the head, because it's
right.
trial and error, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you're new. But what are those, and what do
Yeah.
you? Yeah,
I think right now what we're seeing is a lot of carbon copy creative
yeah,
because of AI. We're seeing, obviously, like, you're a small brand, so you're gonna do what, like, your product is number one. I'm guessing like it's a product or whatever. So how can I save money on marketing or advertising my brand, so on and so forth? So you sometimes AI, and that's fair. That's fair. Whatever.
yeah, yeah,
But then all the messaging looks the same for
yes,
the product, and it loses like that humanness. It loses the conversational nature of how you're speaking to people, and how people really sound,
yeah,
right? Like I think people want to they want to be part of a brand. They want to engage with a product or a service that sounds human. It sounds like someone, like a personality. And sometimes when you're a small business, it just, like, I've with my friends that have small businesses, I go onto their websites or I go into what they're servicing, and it just seems so anybody could do this.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know what I mean? Like, anybody could do this. It doesn't sound like a human wrote it. It sounds like a robot wrote it, and you're like,
yeah,
oh wait, that's very strange. I think that's something to consider. I think another thing to consider is, like you're saying, like, really speaking to the audience and those pain points. I think that's how Glossier started. Literally, like,
yeah,
reading the reviews of what was missing in
yes,
lip gloss or missing
yes.
in their
Oh, I
brand.
love it,
But yeah, I love it. But so that but became their brand, right? Like that
yes,
was
yes,
actually, what helped them at the end of the
yes,
day. And then, yeah, and then just kind of be specific with where you're gonna market. Like, you don't have to market on TikTok and Instagram. Like, where's your audience live? Go there.
yeah, yeah,
Like, maybe you don't even need a social presence. Maybe your form of marketing is through somewhere else.
yeah,
You know what I mean? But it's being authentic to what you're like, the audience you're servicing.
yeah,
And even if maybe it's on Facebook, I know sometimes when we're getting briefed, they're like, "Oh, don't do Facebook." I'm like, "But what if my audience?" So, for example, I think I worked on, what's it called? Create this. It went out of business,
which
unfortunately.
one?
The
Which one?
This brand, it went bankrupt. It was a Pier
Which
One.
Pier One? Okay, like the
Yeah,
home,
yeah.
like a home goods style, but
Yeah,
like
home good.
stuff
So yeah,
from
Pier One. So
international.
it's
Yeah,
like they're describing the audience or whatever, and we're getting all these tidbits, and it's like, why not Facebook? Oh, but nobody's on Facebook. I'm sorry, but Facebook Marketplace.
yeah,
Like, really thinking about that medium of communication, and you don't have to
mm-hmm,
have a big budget. Like, I've had friends do like extremely well with zero budgets, marketing, just thinking outside of the box. Like there was this buddy of mine that worked at this company called Mojo Supermarket,
Yeah.
and when what's his name, Jeremy Allen did that
Okay.
Calvin Klein campaign where he
Yeah.
was modeling on a sofa.
Yeah.
He promote they I forgot what business they had. I think it was like I think it was Facebook Marketplace. They
Yeah.
promoted the sofa on Facebook Marketplace for free, like the actual
Yeah.
sofa
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
the shoot, and it became like this whole viral campaign, and
That's
they talked
amazing.
about it on like the Today Show, and it picked up so much press, and it was free. It was
Yes.
free, but it's just kind of thinking a little bit
Outside the box.
outside the box.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I like that. I really, really like that. So I do want to just tap in because I know we've talked a lot about like what's happening, with DEI and culture. Where do you think things are going? And like what, for other maybe creative directors on the call or just, for business owners in terms of thinking about, how they're going to put their messaging. Like it's so much right now, I mean, what is your advice from that standpoint from now for the next couple of months?
Well, it's interesting because I do think that while the climate at large is like politicizing DEI, I do and I'm optimistic and hopeful that the
Yeah.
culture within advertising will continue going forward in promoting diversity, at least in the companies that I've worked in, where
Yeah.
I'm currently working in, because at the end of the day, it's all dollars.
Yeah.
And dollars indicate that there's a lot of purchasing opportunity in diverse groups. So I think that's a good sign. I think they're gonna maybe want to start staffing up more to reflect that, right? To
Yes.
reflect these communities that, for example, like the Latino community by 2040 is gonna like grow even more than 20%, right? So
Yeah.
these companies, at least from my boss that I spoke with, they went to a seminar, and they were like, General Mills, for instance, was going to start investing more
Yeah.
into these communities because it makes sense. It makes financial sense. So
Yes.
I think that's good. I think a lot of the creative directors that we currently have are a little bit more reflective of the community because of all the work that DEI did instill, and I think that's
Yes.
going to continue to grow, and I think that's going to be better. I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic. I am also from the brovertising,
Yes.
early trajectory.
I'm gonna have you coin that if you
Yeah,
haven't already.
I'm gonna coin that.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know, it's interesting because like all the agencies I've worked with, all the people I've worked with, they are so pro diversity.
Yeah.
Even if they are white, even if they are what bros or whatever, like they are trying their best. Everyone's trying their best, and I think that's kind of been like the consensus, at
Mm-hmm.
least in my lived experience from where I stand. With the partner agencies that we work with, I currently work at a multicultural boutique agency. We partner with like Anomaly, we partner with Pearl Dell, and the consensus has been positive.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I do see a lot more female creative directors. I do see a lot of more creative directors of color
Yeah.
moving up the ladder. So I think it's gonna be fine. I just think it's a matter of like finance and strategies, like making a case
Yeah.
for what it is, right? And
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
numbers don't lie. The numbers don't lie. Like the future is diverse.
I agree.
Your talent pool should reflect that
Yes.
to make the best advertising.
Yeah. So I haven't finished with you yet.
Yeah, no, tell me.
AI.
Oh
The end
gosh.
all and be all question that everybody keeps
Yes,
asking
let's talk
across
about
every
AI.
industry,
Yes.
because it's like, everybody's like, oh my gosh, like AI is going to take away from writing. AI is going to take away from creative. Like, what are the jobs? And we all know that maybe some jobs will be eliminated, but is there going to be an aspect of like where humans are not going to be involved to really create that emotional connection, which is a big part, I think, of advertising, right? And
Yeah.
content creation. So I want to know how you guys are approaching it, how you guys are teaching it in University of Miami, and like what is the general consensus and overall like understanding of
Well,
kind of
yeah,
this thing that's come into the market, but which was there, I mean, but
yeah,
now it's exploded, right?
it's definitely here to stay.
Yeah.
It's here to stay.
It's here to
So
stay and grow.
it's here to stay and grow. I think AI is like creating atrophy for creatives,
Yeah,
because I
interesting.
also do work with AI, like because when my creative partner is not around, I'm like, let's bounce ideas, AI chat GPT
Yes.
model. But when you become too reliant on it, it atrophies the
Yeah.
creative thinking. In terms
Yes.
of academia and how I kind of went about teaching it to my students, I'm like, use it as a tool, but it should you shouldn't use it entirely, because it
Yeah.
like over time, you're still gonna need those skills.
Yes.
It's removing critical thinking from what I've seen, at least in my junior team. Like they just go straight to the machine. I'm like, no, because it will replace you. Like you should work with it as a partner,
Yes.
to come up with ideas and all that stuff, but like it shouldn't take away like your primary creative juice. Now,
Yes.
in terms of what's going to happen in the future, I think we're going to work in conjunction with AI. I do think it is going to affect like at least creativity to some degree, but the creativity that it is putting out, again, it is very carbon copy paste.
Yes.
You can tell a robot wrote it. It's good. It's good
Yes.
thinking. It's
Yes.
fast thinking, but that human nuance, detailed touch is missing.
Yes.
That we go in and we add. So that's personally like how I've experienced it, and at least in my classrooms, when I have them do projects with and without AI, like they're like, oh my god, like how did people do this before? And I'm like, welcome to the real world. Like
Yeah.
we never had this technology
Oh, yeah.
available, right?
Yeah,
So get
totally.
used to it.
Yeah. No, I know. I mean, it's like some of the most amazing ideas came out, right? I mean, and they're still going to be coming out. So,
They're still going to be coming
yeah.
out, and yeah, I just think it's going to be interesting. Like from ChatGPT to Leonardo AI to like now DeepSeek
Yes.
is a thing, and it's even crazier. I think
Yes.
we're a little bit behind the curve in how corporations are still implementing,
For
like
sure.
working with AI
For
to
sure.
advance, at least
Yeah.
from a creative standpoint. But I can say, like, again, in my experience with it, it's not, you can tell when a commercial, I think actually they did a commercial with AI and there was backlash, like it was like missing fingers, and
Oh,
it was just,
yes. Yes.
yeah, like it
Yes.
wasn't
I
like,
think the only one that's done an amazing job um with an AI commercial, I think it was Coca-Cola.
yeah,
Coca-Cola also
Coca-Cola.
like nails it where it was like then and now. I think that was super on point because it was, old school Coca-Cola versus like now with like AI and like that kind of stuff. So I
Yeah,
think they're the only ones that kind of like conceptualized it pretty well.
right.
Yeah, we don't need missing fingers in
Missing
commercials.
fingers, like
Yeah.
double eyeballs.
Yeah.
Um, Actually, this is interesting. I'm gonna give you something that happened. So
Yeah.
I'm a part of the. This is I didn't add this in my bio, but I'm part of
Yeah.
the board of the American Advertising Federation,
Yes, that's right.
and I host the ad trivia like any
Yes.
aspiring local comedian would.
Yes.
And I asked. This is a literal only thing I asked AI. One
Yes.
of the sections was, "Hey, can you scramble the word Patagonia?"
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
Patagonia has like three eyes, okay?
Yeah.
When ChatGPT gave it back to me, it only like when
It missed.
it missed. And it was my bad. I should have checked, but again, I was sleep deprived.
Yeah.
And the students called me out during the trivia when I revealed the answers. They're like, "Hey, there's like another A missing or whatever." And I'm like, "There you
Yeah.
go." So it's not the end all be all. We do need humans
Yeah.
to correct it, to oversee what's being out, the output.
Yeah, I completely agree. I completely
Yeah.
agree. Well, good segue into what you're doing with comedy. I'd like to know how you got into it, where you're taking it because, creatives
Yeah.
have a really interesting way of like having another side to them that is like, whoa, I didn't even see that coming. But we have to have an outlet outside
Yeah,
of
we
like
need an
what we're
outlet.
doing all day long. So
Yeah.
I really want to hear about this.
I always tell it to my students because when you're creative, you're coming up with creativity for brands and you burn
Yes.
out. And if you don't have some sort of source to plug into, it's going to be very hard. So whether it's,
Yeah.
my partner's a photographer, there's people in my company that are bakers. For me, it's always been comedy. I'm just doubling down on it now. It's something inherent to what I've been doing for a long time. I've always written like funny commercials. I've come up
Yeah.
with personalities. But it's always behind the scenes, right? Like I'm always
Yes.
like I write the commercial, but then like like Stephen Colbert, I did a commercial for Smokey Bear. Stephen Colbert was one of the talents, and like of course it's like Stephen Colbert, but like my writing.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? So now that I'm doing comedy, I'm like, okay, now I can be my unapologetic self. I don't have to have a brand like dictating. We have to hit these reasons to believe, and we can't say this and we can't say this and whatever.
Yeah.
And just like really pouring into my brand now with the comedy stuff, and kind of speaking on behalf of my upbringing, because I think one thing that's interesting is growing up in Miami, everyone looks like me and speaks like me and stuff, but when I've moved to New York and worked in California and
Yeah.
Texas, I was like,
Yeah.
oh wow, like I have a refreshing POV that's like people aren't
Yes.
really talking about, hence
Yeah.
my scattered brainness. But yeah, so now I'm doing comedy.
It's not scatterbrainedness. It's creative dust
Yeah,
that just keeps floating and you're like, "Oh, this there, there,
yeah,
there."
it's like, oh no, idea nugget. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
So this is my brain at like
Mhm.
zero, like yeah, this
Yeah.
chemical molecules just
It's
wrap.
like a beautiful mind except with creativity, not numbers.
Yeah, exactly. So it's been interesting, still finding my voice, very much new to the scene. I got in a competition recently, I got an honorable mention amongst the top 35 comedians
Love
in the
it.
scene. So that was a pretty like, oh, go Bre.
Yeah.
We'll see where it goes. My plan is to, kind of push it here in Miami, go on some, mics up in Cali or Austin or New York.
Yes. Yeah. That's great.
And yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how it fares out. And I think one thing that I think we've mentioned, but it's kind of like I'm having an identity crisis.
Yeah.
Because in the morning, I also something else that I do, I'm a mentor for Women of Tomorrow. I'm gonna plug Women of Tomorrow
Yeah.
because this is something important. I think which sucks, and I'm sorry to bring it back to DI, but this to me really, this is what really bothers me about this whole situation is
Yeah.
a lot of programs that would put people of color in these opportunities no longer are there. Like they're being cut. So Verizon had Verizon Fellows, and they cut it out, and that promoted a lot of Black and brown people to come in and get these opportunities.
Yep.
And other brands too. They had these initiatives that no longer are there. But there's this program called Women of Tomorrow I was a part of, and in the morning I go and I speak to these high school girls, and I'm like, if you see it, you can be it. And I'm
Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
just
I
speaking
love
so
that.
positively, and I'm like Deepak Chopra.
Yes.
And then at night I'm like Tony Soprano.
Oh my God, I love this analogy.
Yeah, like
Can I dig a little further into the Tony Soprano part? Maybe
yeah. So
offline.
it's like, which I've always felt with my brand, and and also on LinkedIn. I'm very vocal on LinkedIn under hashtag Breisms for some time.
Yes.
I got a lot of for mental health, and again DEI conversations as well that I got into back and forth with
Yeah.
people in. But yeah, that's where comedy's at right now. I'm excited, and maybe at one point I don't know, maybe I'll be Flo the Progressive person, but for like
Yeah.
the Spanish
Yeah, I
the
love this.
Spanish insurance, like what
Yeah.
that
Oh
is.
my God, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So we're going to tag a bunch of stuff that Bre is working on. Obviously, everything from, the creative director piece, how you can find her on LinkedIn, the ADA website, her trivia nights if you guys are in Miami. And then also, of course, we're going to tag her comedy page so that you guys can check her out. But we'll get everything tagged on the bottom so you guys can get in touch with her, ask her any questions, and follow her. And just just get connected with Bre. Last but not least, Bre, before I let you go, what are 3 pieces of advice that you would give to somebody that's coming up in the entrepreneur world or who is an entrepreneur themselves within your creative space?
Filter what opinions you're getting from people who have actually been where you want to get to.
Yeah.
And I think that's a knife. I think you're gonna get an overwhelming amount of opinions, and you're gonna be bombarded. But at the end of the day, it's like filter it with a grain of salt. And for me, it was like I would always get advice on stuff, and I'm like, but you haven't done what I want to do, so
Yeah.
can you really speak to that? So really filter like those tidbits of advice.
Yeah.
I think another thing too is to have like a really solid self-care ritual.
Love
Because
that.
it's I feel like entrepreneurship is such a grind. You're battling you versus you at all times. You have to give yourself grace. You have to have some sort of like unplugged nature of sorts, whether it's yoga, meditation, journaling, running, whatever. Like you have to have some sort of ritual self-care mechanism baked in.
Yeah.
And then the third thing is like you have to have such a strong support system.
Yes.
Such a strong support system.
And the ones that don't and are pulling you out of it,
Yeah.
just say goodbye to them for now and you can pick up that
100%.
later.
And you might lose people around along the
And
way.
that's okay.
That's okay.
Yeah.
yeah, if you don't lose people, that's bad because you're not evolving, because you should be changing.
Yeah, no, I completely agree.
Yeah.
I totally agree. Oh my gosh, Bree, this has been incredible. You and I can keep going for
Oh yeah, we
forever.
could just, yeah.
Yeah. Maybe we'll have you on again sometime soon, but I really appreciate the time, Bree.
No, same here. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I know I talk like 150 miles per hour, so if you want to slow down,
No, no, no.
pause.
We
So
will put you on negative 0.5.
the miles per hour in the bottom
Yeah.
for folks.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.